Upon the eagle banners fly, now shines the cross's mystery. Upon it life did death endure, and yet by death did life procure. That which the prophet King of earth hath in mysterious verse foretold, is now accomplished whilst we see God ruling nations from a tree. Blessed tree whose happy branches bore the wealth that did the world restore, the beam that did that body weigh, which raised up health's expected praise. Hail cross our help, on thee we call, who keep this mournful festival. Grant to the just increase of grace, and every sinner's crimes efface. Blessed Trinity, we praises sing, to thee from whom all graces spring. Celestial crowns on those bestow, who conquer by the cross below. Amen. My dear friends, there is much grace in the air. Let us not miss it. A lot depends on the receptacle, on the receptivity of the soul at a time like this. Grace is, as it were, hovering around us densely, but if it finds us buzzing, vibrating, and therefore pushing away, too busy, it or he cannot get through. Hence, I would advise you in this week to work on what depends on you, insisting on creating opportunities for encounter. It is not enough to be with other people, even liturgically. I share just one little experience with you because it often comes to mind in this week of the year. It was in the early stages when I came back to Ireland, and in the first year or two it was very, very uninterrupted in the Hermitage. And I found when it came to this time of the year, it was actually so simple compared with the complication of having to organize so many things as sacristan in a big abbey, that I just entered quietly with nothing at all into the bliss of simplicity. And all the words spoke loud and clear. There was nothing but him and me. That you can have as well if you want it. Don't miss the point. Therefore, go apart, especially at certain key moments of grace. Now, what are these key moments of grace? Holy Thursday. Many things happen between the Lord and the disciple on Holy Thursday. Many vocations are actually born in that watching at the altar of repose. Good Friday. The quietness and the emptiness of the calm of the fasting body. It's all an invitation to what? Interiority. We are psychosomatic beings, and it makes a big difference when we are actually empty and quiet. And by the way, the 2,000 years old tradition of celebrating the sacred mysteries at the crack of dawn has worked. And you know why, don't you? When the stomach is empty and the person has been sleeping, there is a calm even inside. The heart beats more slowly. The brain is uncluttered. And the quality of communion and of celebration at the crack of dawn and its power over the rest of the day and therefore of life is very huge, compared with what actually happens quite often now on the pastoral level. People and priests come at some corner of the day full of clutter and think that they can get into the beyond and back just like that. My friends, we're not superhuman beings. If we don't do the preparation, grace is frustrated and limited in its effect on the soul. Do you see what I'm saying? Graces potentially can have a double and a triple and a quadruple effect on the same soul if it does its groundwork. Think on these things. Holy Saturday, if it's properly celebrated, is also a fast day and a day of waiting in puzzlement, reading ancient texts where the whole church is waiting and waiting with the angels. And then the explosion of the night. In that night, all the Easters of the past come back, and if you've been all your life a monk, they're big ones, because Lent is taken seriously. And so is Easter. 2 or 3 hours of long, solemn chant with all the trimmings, and boy, they can do them in a monastery. It makes a big difference compared with the average quickie, e.g., not to be repeated, in our parish we've got at Bellewstown at 6:15 in broad daylight the first ignition, and then at 7:30, not long afterwards, the second one, still in broad daylight. Perfect liturgical timing, and all done at the maximum speed, not to be repeated. Now, what am I saying? Do you think that there's no difference in the effect that it has on the receptive soul? I want, however, to go in just one other direction because it's linked with the reading that we've had. There were 3 on Calvary. The Lord, the good thief, I think he's called Dismas, isn't he? And the bad one. Now, how many have you seen Passion by Mel Gibson? Good. Most of you are above a certain age, I would say. Just this week, I was listening to a modern version of the Screwtape Letters done by a very good American priest, extremely penetrating psychologically, all in reverse. And one of the things that Screwtape was saying was, don't let them see that film of Mel Gibson, especially on their own. It's a very strong injection into the soul, seeing something pretty close to what actually happened for us, for you and for me, individually. John Paul II, now blessed, said when he was shown it in private in the Vatican before it was released, è stato proprio così. It was just like that. So we, with modern means, can be at the foot of Calvary and cringe, watching the angels collecting the precious blood, shed and poured out in vain in our time, in all that murky mass of sacrilegious communions which right now will be hitting the Sacred Heart in these next days. How many will have gone to confession? What is Easter duty now? But I come back to Mel Gibson. and these three on Calvary. Do you remember what happens? It's inspired by the visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich. Now, blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. And it goes something like this. We have that scene captured by actually somebody I knew in France, Pierre-Marie Bernard of La Trappe, who did this wonderful three-dimensional thing of that gaze of the dying Christ to the good thief. Aujourd'hui, tu seras avec moi dans le paradis. Today you will be with me in paradise. That gaze, which is captured in one instant by Mel Gibson, just the same, a sideways look and a promise of bliss in a few seconds' time. And his soul grows. His soul grows. Rather similar to actually the shock I had this week. This is my novice master, not far from here. I'm here because of him, Father Gerard Cusack. He was with us in perfect form, in full swing, reigning as the superior of the house, and a few days later, he was no longer there. Just like that, extinguished in one fell swoop. Do you know that only a few years ago, when I was a young novice, he was so good to me that he would take me everywhere in the car, and one day he was finding a place for me in Dublin when he was sending me to study there, and in those days he could get away with anything. He was so trusting and happy in my company. We shared a room, we were actually in pyjamas, saying Compline in bed and happily going to bed. That was the calm relation of father and son. You could never do that now, but to say, when you've been close to somebody and they've just gone, one wonders where and how it looks like at the other end, flying into the arms of that same Saviour. But then the other one, do you remember that scene? At one point, after he's just been emitting venom and hatred against his potential Saviour, this bird comes along, a horrible vulture-looking thing, and starts picking at his eye and gouging out his eyes, apparently in the visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich. Then what happens? In utter despair, perfectly conveyed, as Mel Gibson can do, he shows that point at which his soul, in full venom and hatred, comes out of that body and goes the other way, and the jaws of the underworld open, and he goes down and down and down, and what happens then? This horrid creature, in glee and blissful hatred, smiling, looks at him and says, "Come, I have conquered." That, my friends, is the drama of this week. Calvary hitting out all over the planet and finding yes or no in every human being, yet on this time of time for a few seconds more.